Now to introduce the poets, I give you Associate Editor Richard Silberg.
Dean is going to be reading first from this spectacular book, Before the Borderless, Dialogues with the Art of Cy Twombly. When I say Cy Twombly, I'm sorry that there's the cartoon character who, you can't say W's. I wish I could think of the name, but Cy Twombly. Cy Twombly is throughout this book. I want to say, first of all, the book is dedicated to Dean's parents, whose, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, you don't need it.
Whose deaths bookended the writing of this book. There's an essay at the end called Pentimento. I won't say too much about it because perhaps, Dean, you want to. But his father, who was actually the mayor of his hometown and a sports coach and a much-loved guy, died probably a few weeks before Dean went to the Gagosian Gallery to see this exhibit. Now, Cy Twombly has an epigraph saying, "I never really separated painting and literature," which goes to the title of the book, Borderless, between writing and painting. But if you know Dean's work, nothing is ever so simple. He has a ferocious desire for meaning, and you can see that throughout this book, which is mostly questions like, what does it mean to write a line? What can we understand what we can't read? I'm botching the questions, but they drive at life, death, the meaning of it all. And just very quickly, because you won't be able to really see these paintings from where you're sitting, but they have words, poems, some of them are in a kind of a ghost calligraphy. And Dean addresses 50 of these artworks, poem to painting. So let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Richard. You always give the best introductions. I hope every time I give a reading, you're there somewhere to give an introduction, because they're always so smart and thoughtful. And in fact, I want to steal that phrase, ghost calligraphy. That was really good. That really should be the title of the book, Ghost Calligraphy. Thank you very much. Thanks, Joyce. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. It's great to be reading with Gillian, whose new book is phenomenal. I'm not going to read a whole lot of poems. I'll talk maybe a bit about the book. If you don't know Twombly, Cy Twombly, American abstract painter, went to Black Mountain College with Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg. He's from that area. He studied poetry with Charles Olson, He knew Merce Cunningham. He is often considered, I think it was Peter Sheldall, the New York critic, who said, there's Twombly, he's the other one, not John Rauschenberg. And he lived most of his life in Italy. He would come back. He grew up in the South and in Virginia. He's friends with Sally Mann. Sally Mann writes about him in her memoir. And he maintained a studio in New York, one in Lexington, and then also the major one in Italy. And he was really interested in the ancient world, really interested in ancient poetry, Virgil, Homer, Ovid. So while Jasper Johns is painting the American flag and Rauschenberg is doing the collages of the Kennedys, Twombly is like making these big paintings with quotes from the Iliad on it. Very out of fashion at the time. And like Richard said, he was also obsessed with poetry. And roughly, I think 900 of his pieces have lines of poetry in them by some of my favorite poets, Keats, Rilke, Lorca, Wallace Stevens. And I was always really interested in why someone who's a visual artist, who doesn't have the burden of poetry on them, when he could make all visual art, would still put lines of poetry in the visual art. Like, don't you become an artist to get away from language? And I was really interested in the fact that he always returns to language. And so this book is really interested in the vocabulary that painting and poetry share. The line, composition, the visual field, proportionality, those kinds of things. And so the poems ask a lot of questions, as Richard says, about the relationship between writing and seeing. Reading, seeing, looking, what's the difference? What's the difference between writing and drawing? If Twombly draws a poem from Rilke on canvas, is that writing? Is it drawing? If I write a poem on canvas, is that drawing? Is it writing? What's the difference between reading and seeing? What does it mean for art and poetry to be inscrutable? I think all of these things are really so fascinating. Anyway, so the first poem I'm going to read is in response, the first poem on your sheet, first painting, it's in response to Keats's Ode to Psyche. And he did 2 or 3 different pieces that talk to Keats. And this is one of them. And if you can see in the upper left-hand part, there's some lines from Ode to Psyche in it. And then you'll also see that in the middle, that sort of scratch out, he has Ode to Psyche, and then he has the word sonnet, and the sonnet's sort of scratched out. So the title of my poem is Sonnet with a line through it. The inscrutability of influence, and it's a kind of messed up sonnet. Mid-hushed, cool-rooted, these tuneless numbers of pale-mouthed prophets, tender-eyed Aurorian, one only adds new ink. The human heart is a grid in the midst of this wide quietness. This heart, repository of all writing. What is a poem? Neither form nor usage, neither urn nor autumn. Bones burn, leaves light, and lay down their matches. A pencil lifts its hand. So as Richard said, the book began, my father died in 2017, and not long after that I was in New York. I had just gone back to Oklahoma, where I'm from. I grew up in a small town, to go through his things. And as Richard said, he had just boxes and boxes of mementos. He was a very public-facing figure. And immediately after that, I went to New York, I was doing a reading, and I went to this exhibit, which was a career retrospective of Twombly drawings. And I was looking at the drawings in much the same way I was looking at my father's effects and asking, like, what makes a life? How does one contribute? And I went home that night and wrote a poem that wound up being the first poem in the book. And then over the course of the next few years, I just became obsessed. And now this book is here. And this poem is in response to the second painting there. And there are 6 kind of scribbles you'll see. And this poem has 6 sections. And so one of the things I try to do in various poems in the book is try to replicate on the page what Twombly does on the canvas. And this is one you can see pretty easily. This is a poem that I wrote after my mom died last year of COVID, right as this book was going into print. And so I wound up doing a piece. This is a Twombly piece called Variation on the Elegies, and sort of trying to replicate on the page what Twombly's doing here. Anyway, this is the poem that kind of does that, and each of the sections is kind of trying to do a different form of ekphrasis. It's called Meditation on Instruction. In Twombly's Untitled, you don't know where to look because you can't figure out which way the surface is moving. At first, you believe it begins at the top of the canvas, almost in mist, before spiraling down towards you. But then you see the direction is upward, a landscape in reverse, scaling a shifting mountain of stone and debris until it disappears into the clouds. Vast swirl of stasis and motion, umber erasure of the heavens. 2. When I look at this painting, I see Oklahoma. I see autumn, I see wheat fields, I see the sun, an array of rust, and the wind bending the stalks, but at the same time mending them into something akin to skin, smoothing itself over a body that is not there. Internal swirl of the not yet cut, gloom and on, spike and stem, glazed gold in the long rake of late light, all spiral, all coil, here tiller and rachis, here the ligule of last leaf. 3. How many fields go fallow inside me? Do you recognize me, wind, blind in the emptiness made by your moving? 4. This is one of the few scribble paintings Twombly executed in earth tones. Color is its own language, its own metaphor. Imagine the same composition but in blue or green. Imagine this poem in stanzas. Imagine the dead deep below the surface of the field, the roots of the stalk stretching toward history as the little tips in the bright breeze make their own mark in infinite space. 5. In 1970, Twombly is 41 years old. He paints this in Rome, where 41 years later he will die. This piece makes me think of death, the palette of harvest, the season receding into the long barrow of winter, the harrow hard into the ground, the nights numberless, cold and countless, the orange and ash and flesh and flint and fall, the silent shift from stem to soil, the last release, the unlocking leaf, the slash of sickle and scythe, the brush lifting from the canvas, the pencil pausing. 6. When I was a boy, my grandfather walked me around the rim of our family farm. Wheat and more wheat, nothing but wheat, barely soil, barely a hill. It was Sunday. He was still wearing a tie. His shirt was the color of the wheat. His tie, brown as the dirt the wheat bequeathed. If you stand here long enough, he said, you will learn everything that you need to know. I, who always wanted to be taught, asked him if he thought God could learn anything new. He put his hand on my shoulder, and we walked into the stalks like two figures stepping into a story from an ancient book that is yet to be written, into the blank spaces where illustrations would go. The page, like the world, is always waiting to be known. When God looks at my life, the Lord learns nothing from me but infinite regret. But when the Lord looks at this painting, it is God who learns about light. Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. So the book is in 3 sections, except for the pentimento part at the end. So 3 sections of poems. The first and the third are very, very equal. There's a Twombly piece on the left and my poem on the right. In the middle, things get a little crazy. The poems are longer, they stretch across pages. I'm going to read one of these pieces, and it talks to the two, it's actually a series of 5 pieces that hang in the Louvre, Abu Dhabi. These big, beautiful, blue, almost floor-to-ceiling pieces. And the script here looks a little bit like Arabic writing. And I was thinking about these pieces. I was actually working on this poem during some of the fires in Sonoma. And my in-laws live in Sonoma, and they actually had to evacuate and come stay with us until it was clear. And I was just thinking about everything. This is called Meditation on Communication. The poem sort of goes all over the page, and there's no punctuation. I haven't read this out loud except maybe one other time. So we'll see how it goes. Meditation on Communication. This is an epistolary poem, and there are a few of these in the book. Dear Cy, and why wouldn't I go, like language, to where I am not? Blue scrim of sky and sea, calligraphy of memory, cataract, not illustration, but realization, rhythm, wave, cascade. Have you seen the now, Cy? You would not, could never. The sky, sun-scorched, fire and more fire, black as a bruise, but not as soft. I think even oceans are burning or melting, everything molting from what it was to what it is going to be. Tonight, my son asked what my weird superpower would be, and I said, to walk into a painting. So why wouldn't I, Cy? Into it, you go, among the blue, trace of the almost of my name, murmur of the visual. You have to me written, so why? How could I not become the blue, sky-skinned, sea-skinned, my body a choir of birdsong, ready to light up with the glowing wheel of alteration, so that we may see far enough ahead to go. That blue, it is beyond blue, the way this life is beyond all things coming directly toward. So why not among the cataracts, lit by the light of not language, but its shadow, its shell, as though it too is burned through to bone? Go, I have driven through flame. This is not metaphor, and yet it is language, or at least its shell, its scorch mark, marked. Look at my skin, Cy. I am as blue as the iris behind death's black patch. Blue as the sky when it changes to sea. Go, I am already there. Oh, your hearts are big, lovers of poetry. So one of my favorite Twombly pieces, he did over 10 years, called Letter of Resignation. And these are the top 2 on the back page. And it's like 27 different pieces where he just sort of starts these letters and lists and then scratches through. And the poem, so one of the things I really love about Twombly is he's got this kind of extemporaneous, chaotic, experimental, whimsical nature to his work. And I try to do this a little bit in the poem. The poem is really kind of crazy for me. But I wound up, I think there is a point where Twombly stops being obsessed with making art and just wants to communicate. And I'm going to read this part in this poem where I try to do something like that. Dear Cy, dearest Cy, everything is ending. My mother, an artist, painted her final work on the cast covering my son's arm. I think about her dying every day. I feel it is impossible to write. I feel as though this book, composed almost entirely during a pandemic, is both bookended and wholly inscribed by death. Twombly is dead. My father is dead. My mother is dead. My father-in-law is dead. One of my closest friends is dead. She drank herself to death. I've not told you that before. Will you forgive me? Can you even read this? Did you notice, Cy, that in my book of poems, this section is in prose? Why do you think that is? I wonder if the equivalent for you is including text in your paintings. What if I painted this or drew it? Could you see it then? Dear Cy, I know I just told you my mother is dead, but I feel I need to say it again. And do you know what else? When I tried to type dead above, I spelled Dean. Dear Cy, did you know that dead and Dean are only one letter apart? My friend Elizabeth noticed before me that Dean Rader is only 2 letters from Dear Reader. Dear Reader / Dean Rader, please accept my resignation. All right, I'm going to finish with 2 short ones, and then I'm just the opening band for the Taylor Swift of Bay Area poetry.
No.
The Adele.
Better? A little more edge.
Beyonce.
I was talking about in terms of loved. All right, this is a love poem for my wife. So this is, Twombly's really most famous for these scrawl pieces. And he got these because he's really obsessed with Leonardo's deluge drawings. I don't know if you know Leonardo's deluge drawings, but Google them when you get home. They're really amazing. And so he's sort of imagining the flood. And this is one of the only most of his scribble pieces are untitled. And this is called Cold Stream. I was kind of thinking about rivers and currents and movements and floods. It's called Meditation on Motion. The line, like the river, does not know to stop. Neither does my wonder. I would like these lines to be drawn on my skin. I would like to feel these lines beneath my skin. A current alternating between my body and the earth, galvanized with meaning, charged with inscriptions of infinity, like us. Oh, beloved, to flow with you through this life and after, the elegant simplicity of a fusion, our motion lost in the rolling waves that carry us out, encirclement and continuance in the connection of everything, drawing us in. Beloved, we don't have to be beautiful to be beauty. And I'll close with one of the Orpheus poems. So the first poem in the book talks to a series of Orpheus pieces that Twombly did in 1979. And the last one also talks to this Orpheus. And this is Orpheus written in Greek. And so one of the things that this book is really interested in is this cycle of reciprocity. Like, I love how people devote their life to art and talk to other people, maybe in the present, maybe in the long past, that have devoted their life to art. So this is a poem in which I'm talking to Twombly, who's talking to Rilke, because he's obsessed with Rilke's sonnets to Orpheus. And Rilke is talking to Ovid, who whatever Orpheus myth he's reading. But then I'm also talking to Rilke and to Twombly, and this whole book is sort of just an homage to people who make. And to you all. So thanks for coming. Thanks, Joyce. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Poetry Flash team. You guys are the best. Once again, in thought about Rilke, Twombly's Orpheus paintings, and fatherhood, I consider the inevitability of creation and loss. Scarred sky, the last beams bruised beneath the surface of stars, the whole world a contusion, slowly transforming from one thing to the next, the one cell, the one life, always becoming two. What if it is the sun that follows the moon? How do we know we're not the bridle hard against the teeth of this life? Just because something has a saddle doesn't mean we should ride it. What would it take to be inside the music the cello does not know how to play, What would it take to say to the strings, make me silent? What would it take for the skin to sing its own song of blood and blooming? To know one truth is to know nothing. To wear your nothingness, well, now we're getting somewhere. I once believed I could be lifted by language out of language. I once believed the horse hooves in the distance were the ocean telling the rocks about water. I once believed loss would thread my mind's needle like a blind seamstress. But that was a long time ago. Now, I understand that time is nothing more than pure duration, and that the mind is a field of herons who have lost their way. Even so, I will let the entire lie down in my body's blue light in hope that something will start to heal. Thank you all.
Gillian Conoley, her new book, Notes from the Passenger. And we also have, there are other books of Dean's works and days, and I'm forgetting
self-portrait.
Self-portrait as Wikipedia entry. And we've also got Gillian's, I love this title, A Little More Red Sun on the Human. Now this, new and selected, up there on the table. Now this book, Notes from the Passenger, is a voice speaking. Almost the entire book. The only section of this book that I can think of where you're in a place and a story is being told is Saint Perpetua, who the book says invented the diary, and the section details her martyrdom. But for the most part, the voice speaks, and it goes everywhere. It doesn't make, let's say, prose sense. It just talks. And its talk is wide. It talks about mycorrhizal, I forget what that is an adjective for, but you go out to fungal mycelia, you go to astrophysics, you go everywhere. And just to give you a better sense of that reach, here are a couple of headings for poems. How to Have a Future Memory, The Next World, and then there's a quote from George Bataille that is repeated. The possibility of joy in the face of death. Oh yeah, so really the mystery is, why is this voice so powerful? Why does it move us? And so those of you who haven't heard Gillian before, think about the mystery of this voice. Let's give her a welcome.
Always gonna pop some champagne.
There you go.
I just,
Oh, yeah.
whoa. Okay. Well, I had a revelation looking at the handout, and I'll talk about that in a minute, because Dean's not going to hear me. But, and are you listening? mainly, I wanted to thank Poetry Flash for being Poetry Flash, and Joyce Jenkins and Richard Silberg, and the many decades of devotion to poetry and what they've done for everyone is really, it's more than a contribution, it's like an accomplishment, and we're so lucky, and it's really nice to be in this particular space because it's so rich and there's so much to look at and listen to and experience, and so I'm glad it's nice to be. I have never been here before, and this is a really cool place, so it's great, and thank you for everything. And I also wanted to thank Dean, and this is my revelation aspect. The cover of this book is the artist is named William Kentridge, and he is in his 60s and lives in South Africa, and he works a lot. I'm sure he was, looking at the. I had this thought before, but I really had it today. That Kentridge must have been extremely influenced by Cy Twombly, and that they both must have been influenced by Henri Michel, because Henri Michel wrote, he was, as I'm sure all of y'all are real familiar with his writing, but he had a visual artist career going alongside of that the whole time it almost eclipsed the writing, but not quite, even in France. So, and he did all the systemic writing and stuff. And so, but my real revelation has to do with Dean and I personally, because Dean being from Oklahoma and me being from Texas, what we do together is we go hunting for barbecue.
That's all true.
And we never talk about the real subterranean conversation that's been going on all this time. And so it makes this incredible sense that we're reading together right now. And I hope that we have that conversation.
Over ribs.
Over ribs. Because it's funny, okay, Dean's favorite, if barbecue's really good, he calls it solid. This is a really solid place. But anyway, that was one of the things that the pandemic screwed up.
That's true.
So that must resume, and it's really good to be out in the world and see people out in the world again. Okay, so y'all can hear me and we're good. All right. Okay. I'll start. Let's see. There was this book concerns itself with the communication between the dead and the living, and mortality and immortality, catastrophe, and a kind of space-time continuum, wherever we seem to be in, that I think we all feel and have, we're just in it. And so it tries to address that. I'm going to read for about 20 minutes, and maybe a little bit less, we'll see. And I'll start with The Passenger, which is the first poem in the book. Once and for all mind wanderings of the passenger, the beer garden's composure in its death rattle, green partitions, scaled walls, backstroking waterways, lure to lure. The passenger rejects projection, its limpid, mirror-like distortion, prefers vibratory qualities of the seat cushion, a spreading of the hands. The passenger walked without destination for years, without aging, in open sorrow. A suitcase out of which everything had fallen by the wayside, bit by bit, as though a salesperson without wear. Along sidewalks, discarded nurse caps, the gloves of queens, a demolition of the route, in the deep microhysal network between white bark pine and subalpine conifers, the passenger began to step and swerve in an unsteady manner, a hologram projected up against a hieroglyph, figure drawings in caves, indeterminate, exact, the sun going red, yellow, red, often never unearthed. The passenger finished off the memory drink with its supernova's hyperrelativistic speck. Sun still more than 4 billion years old, a glint into Homeric times, when one could pick up one's chariot with one hand. Warmed ocean, open country, it was most like night, this thing we walked into. Okay, and this is a longer poem. It follows right after the passenger, and the title's The Messenger. The messenger came without papers and song, out of sleep unharmed, a guide figure at a pit stop, digestive issues, a tingling sore throat. At all times, the time between technologies dripped, a rain silver tinge translucenced into day. Pink-blue shade of one unidentified flower bush, the messenger took a sprig, couldn't say, I am a messenger with epistolary, anthropological, epigenetic trauma. Some deep ancestral thing floats over the greening hills. Surely you understand this, the messenger said, at a loss. The messenger had no distinguishing physical characteristics, but was more feeling that all was going to be made clear. Necrotic silence in a shed, a peaceful death inside a bunker, an overheated RV round holding screen and air. One could still breathe out of a twizzle stick. The messenger was part of the deep urge to sit, stand, lie down in an aura of intimacy awaiting the message. The charged surround data claims we open around 15 times a day. Awaiting the message, it does not matter what one secretes or imbibes, whether is a serotonin permafrost, a lickable flame. The messenger would sometimes appear stretched out before the monument, overgrown dragonflies, iridescent at pairs, flit mortality over the body, picking up pairs, the body that is grounded by the planet. I have sent you a moonstone talisman via snail mail, says the messenger, attempting friendliness. Also, pain is everywhere. War never cleanses. In her silk coat pocket, the algorithm fibrillating. The messenger wanted an implant in the hand the size of a grain of rice. To get shopping done, the blackout curtains drawn. Under a sun, color of fresh salmon now frozen, some said a new seasoning of smoke and ash sprinkled over slices of mango would portend the messenger was of temporary non-citizenship in an exclusive, genderless, paradisical future universe, an orb where we take a car, an invaginated spermicide, down pathways to an old belief system, turned glassine, on which, on either side, we who were awaiting the message in an aura of intimacy peered, looking through, smitten by the mystery of one another, as if that were the message going all Cohen, with a worn deck of red cards, a divining rod, whispering technology of a battery clock. I would love to begin to explain the many voices plugged in, wires dangling, a desire for windstorm. Starlings sing to hear themselves. It is pleasurable, reply the naturalists. I would love to begin to say something to relieve the onslaught of unleashed voices, but it appears I have fallen down a sky blue too, in the aura of intimacy awaiting the message between birth and personhood. Death's evensong enters everyone you love, pierces gut, And everyone forgets very, very slowly pears flushed russet in trees, a quiver over history's ossuary of banality and greed. The roadside tumbles a child's silver bucket, handle still on the pail. Why daylilies, why thistle, why shoes, hats to carry departed's death essence to those of us remaining among the longest living? We lost the baby, though the baby crowned. When we loved, we were crowned. The sorrows returned when our crown's gems, thorns ruptured into our skulls. Bombs, bombs, dick pics and bombs, the live takes of how to sweep cages of baby shit back onto ruling class. I would like to message you, but the white powdery appropriation of my throat, cuttlefish, songbird, vapor, in this body is like a body politic or stringy cloud, everyone a sage, rising on a platform, a rapture massaged into all of the throats, multiglottal, the collective dream of art, how even in death or in birth, dust motes glint the perineum, a celestial orbit. The messenger presents the body with a very clean blood in the curse, a head full of Ouroboros for a wig if all hair falls out. In the middle of no more money, in orgasm, we give ourselves over to the briny substance just under the surface of the divine. Somewhere in love remains trust. In the melody, in the die-off, in the clear, clear water a messenger is tracking, dataless, where the mysteries are contemplated. In the true ink and felt future public orphan of the word, sky blue, clear sky blue. I have a lot of breath to read those long poems. Actually, I have some water. Okay. This is a short poem, and it's called White Spruce. Like the tree, the white spruce. If all experience is mystical, the white spruce swayed in the window, branch by branch, almost to the doorstep, willow-like, near your sun-damaged eyes. And what do dart's sinuous motions have to do with Leaf's actions? I asked the young woman, I asked the grandmother, and the entire family crawling across the floor. And who is the young returnee who would carry his AK-47 past the 7-Eleven, almost to the corner and back, wanting chips, sometimes candy, a contemplative on duty? This wake-sleep sea, the planet and its lost parts, lay plow to the furrow, dream a little dream with me. This poem, Bodies I Lay Down With in Bright Grass. My father appears in the poem. Everything a lot easier once I began speaking directly to the dead. In the crisp air, in the space flying toward me, an invitation to run to and with. The American eagle can push a goat off the side of a cliff. It has no predators. One she I spotted, OD'd or played, one she who wished for something a little more chthonic than the bald eagle for our national bird. Faces sharp as other, steady on. Acid head boyfriends in Vietnam, polyvalent, colonialist, cinematic warriors on constant replay. My father's World War II scar across his back, diagonally rotted between shoulders. A Christian love, he walked and talked, and U.S. took at 22, replaced with a strong Scotch in one hand, a Winston in the other, and more church, church, church. A pew we practically wore through, sitting with him. Why he sang so loud, the in-between, and I am other, a why we run, a paradise. Okay, so I think Richard's kind of sentient. I'm gonna read one poem from the series that he mentioned that there are 4 poems that all titled "The Possibility of Joy in the Face of Death," which is from George Butoh, and so I'll read one of them, and it's part 2. Okay, these poems are a little strange. The other ones weren't, but this one, they're a little, whatever. Okay, part 2. What the empty pocketbooks aura intoned, night sorcery, lined in a crushed blue-red velvet, color of blood coursing under skin. If I thrift an old pocketbook, do I carry another's DNA? Was it she, the previous owner, in the compact's mirror, her face and the residue of powder, who looked back at me, who had no illusions with immortality? She who was short of a tempest and a moan had a shrike's toenail tooth to help tear prey, leave to thorn for later. When it rained, we saw in slant a gleaming white shirt sliced through sky, interpolated with the season's last hanging walnuts in their green shells. We, beneath the rhythm of roof's calypso, ran. It was as if when we spoke, our lips were kissed raw, our throats closed, crowed. Like you in frames of film arriving in present tense. I can trace the way back to my era's hotel. I still have the desk key, said the person who tried to speak for me. She who would string all this together, she who would free the rain from its lyric contract. Why do the living want to wear the dead's clothes? In the familiar limitlessness of a season's glance, I threw away her receipts, each folded tissue, the tag. I knew to remain suspicious of the archive, its slight bleach scent, moldy antihistamine, its atmospherics of farewells, carefully wrought invitations to vanish. I would not be a trustee. And now I'm going to read the last one, which the poem is for my daughter, and it's titled "How It Was No Longer Only the Country That Was Divided." Saint Perpetua is mentioned in the poem. She invented the diary in prison. There's a long poem later in the book that I haven't figured out how to read it. When I read it, it sounds like prose, and I just think it confused. I have to figure it out. But anyway, she was she invented the diary in prison while she was awaiting execution. She was a pagan turned Christian, and this is 203 CE, and I think that's all I need to say about her. Okay, it's a poem for my daughter. How it was no longer only the country that was divided. It was the order in the words, so that when someone said work, we lay down. So that when someone said art, memory was our insufficiency. We caught it in our hands, grievous sharp. After 5 or so years, the t-shirt pills Every day I say, try throwing it away to teach my daughter something new. Your grandfather's war helmet, I say, your grandmother's high pile of cottony tresses, the opal axis of her hairpin, steel mink of her closed eye, something new. Who speaks through your mouth? Throw it away. Do you want it to say Sister Perpetua or Mother Apocalypse on your t-shirt? Tumbling out, a word order reveals a pack of boys who unzip to sire the city seepage. I say, if just cosmological camouflage coats us, we reroute to another street. I mean, who knows? The house might not even be here. You, however, are my wonder, fatal, prenatal, as water down a leg. I was born after a war, came of age in a war, leave war everywhere. Who speaks through your mouth won't be me. Something very large and open and waiting, waiting. I yearn to fill my hole. You scroll and want worlds, the many worlds of wanting worlds. The gentle body of light enters the car, slow surfing the speed bumps, carrying us along oceanically. Because I am vanishing, I think to show you how, but not just now. Let's not talk just now. Return, return, says the body of light, deciding to not decide which one of us to call into gentle body of light's luscious quandary, settling also into the front seat, transmuted, inflamed, our faces, our voices. If as mother I gave you mortality, if as daughter you gave me immortality's brief mirror glint, you are reaching into screen to play your music. If this is the end, empty hands of humanity, will not tomorrow be enough for you? Mortality upon us with its rosy edge of want. Mortality upon us with the rosy edge of what? So nothing cannot go unsaid. To pass the night in open air, St. Perpetua invented the diary in prison, and after requesting water, knew not to ask for any other favor but perseverance of the flesh. I'm green and strong as live oak on dry gold grass. I'm blue with externalizing my interior enemies. When they are gone, I aspirate in primeval mist. James Joyce wrote the dead until the last page was snow full. If there is fire, we will pick it up, play with it. Gentle body of light, I am lonesome pine for you. Who speaks waits under the blind glare of Jane Eyre's mysterious red room. Unlock, and we river came the lyric. You know that patois. Gentle body of light, you've got such a cruel ideal. Grievous sharp-nailed coyote steps at sea foam's edge. If we isolate the isotope, may it rain in the echo chamber. Gentle body of light, when we're within you, we're outside you, we swim the plasma, we wood shred the threshold, find airport by matchlight. Thank you so much.